You just signed the papers on a $600,000 condo. One bedroom, decent view, your name finally on a title. You post the keys on social media. Your parents call to congratulate you. Your coworkers nod with quiet envy. You feel like you crossed a finish line that separates real adults from everyone else. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there is this warm, satisfying thought. At least, I'm not throwing my money away on rent anymore. Now fast forward 18 months. You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday night, staring at a spreadsheet you never expected to build. Your mortgage payment is $25 a month. That felt manageable when you signed. But then came the property tax bill, $22.62 a year, broken into installments that somehow always surprise you. Strata fees, home insurance, a special assessment from the building because the parking garage needs waterproofing. You add it all up and realize something that makes your stomach drop. The money you thought you were saving by not renting did not go into equity. It didn't build your net worth. It evaporated into a dozen line items you never saw coming and nobody warned you about. Here's the part that really stings. Your friend you quietly pitied for still renting a similar unit in the same building for $28.50 a month. She has been taking the gap between your total housing costs and her rent, dropping it into an index fund while you were calling your strata council about a leak in the hallway. She was compounding at roughly 7% after tax. She isn't stressed on Sunday nights. No spreadsheet keeps her up, and this is where the lie lives. Not in some obscure financial theory, not in a textbook. It lives in a sentence you've heard so many times. It feels like gravity. Renting is throwing money away. You've heard it from your parents. You've heard it from coworkers. You've probably said it yourself. It is one of those beliefs that feels so obviously true. That questioning, it seems almost foolish, but that is exactly what makes it dangerous. Because the moment you stop questioning it, you stop doing the math. And the moment you stop doing the math, you start making the most expensive decision of your life based on a feeling instead of a number. So before you congratulate the next person who just closed on a place, and before you feel that familiar pang of guilt for still renting, understand something. The scoreboard you've been reading your whole life is broken. The numbers on it are incomplete, and the people quietly winning this game might be the ones you've been feeling sorry for. The real question was never whether you own or rent. The real question is whether you've ever actually laid every single cost on the table and compared them. Honestly, because once you do, once you see what a one-bedroom in Vancouver truly costs, an owner versus a renter, when nothing is hidden, the answer stops being obvious and starts getting uncomfortable. So let's stop guessing and start counting. Because the only way to know whether buying or renting actually wins is to put two real lives next to each other in the same building, on the same street, and watch what the numbers do over time. The address is 1155 Homer Street, right in the belly of Yaletown, downtown Vancouver. One unit in this building is listed for sale at $600,000. One bedroom, one bathroom, about 684 square feet. Down the hall, a nearly identical unit is available for rent at $2,850 a month. Same lobby, same elevator, same garbage chute. The only thing separating these two lives is what happens after you sign. If you choose to rent, your monthly picture is brutally simple. You write a check for $2,850. You add about $30 for renter's insurance, and your total cost is $2,880. Every single dollar of that is gone. The moment it leaves your account, it stings. But at least the wound is visible. You know exactly how much blood you're losing each month. Now, step into the shoes of the buyer. The listing says $600,000, but the real price tag starts growing before you even pick up the keys. To avoid paying mortgage insurance on top of your mortgage, you need to put down 20% on a $600,000 home. That is $120,000 in cash. Pulled out of your savings, your investment accounts, maybe your entire financial safety net, and poured into the concrete walls of a one-bedroom condo. Then, British Columbia hands you a bill called the Property Transfer Tax. On this home, that comes to $10,000. Not a fee you can negotiate. Not a cost you recover later. $10,000, bought on closing day. So before you sleep a single night, you have committed $130,000. That is no longer earning you a cent anywhere else. Your mortgage sits at $480,000. You lock in a 4% fixed rate over a standard 25-year amortization, and your monthly payment comes out to roughly $25-28. Now, most people hear that number and immediately compare it to the rent. Down the hall, they see a gap of over $300, and their brain whispers, buying is cheaper. But that whisper is lying to you. Your mortgage payment is not your housing cost. It is one line on a longer receipt. Every month, you also owe property tax. The annual bill on this unit is $22.62, which means about $188 is draining out of your account each month, whether you think about it or not. Strata fees add another $44. Home insurance for an owner runs around $80. Stack it all up and your actual monthly outflow as a buyer lands somewhere around $2,840. Look at that number. Now look at the renter's $2,880. The gap between these two lives has collapsed to roughly $40 a month. $40. That is the entire visible advantage of owning a $600,000 asset. But the math gets worse, because not every dollar is building you wealth. When you hand the bank $25.28 each month, a large portion of that goes straight to interest. In your very first month, the interest charge on that loan at 4% is approximately $1,600. That means only about $928 of your payment is actually chipping away at what you owe. The other $1,600 vanishes into the bank's pocket. Just as permanently as rent vanishes into your landlord's, you are not buying your home. In those early years, you're renting money from a bank, and the price of that rental is disguised inside a payment that carries the word mortgage instead of the word rent. So let's add up every dollar the buyer loses each month and never gets back. There is $1,600 in mortgage interest, $188 in property tax. There is $44 in strata fees, and $80 in home insurance. That totals $1,912 per month in purely unrecoverable costs. The renter, by comparison, loses $2,880. But the buyer's losses do not stop there. Step back and look at the full cast of characters who get paid. Before you build a single dollar of real equity, the bank takes its interest, nearly $19,000 in the first year alone. The provincial government takes a property transfer tax the moment you sign. $10,000 due up front, non-negotiable, gone before you even unpack a box. Then there is property tax, strata fees, and home insurance, which together run about $8,700 a year. And when you eventually sell, the realtors show up with their hands out on a property valued around $695,000. The combined commission for buying agent, selling agent, and sales tax comes to roughly $24,500. You earned nothing from that transaction. You simply paid two strangers a fee for the privilege of leaving. Add it all up for a single year: interest, property tax, strata, insurance, and the amortized weight of those one-time costs. The homeowner is bleeding approximately $318 more per month in pure cash outflow compared to the renter. And that gap is not buying you faster equity. It is buying you the feeling of ownership, while the system collects its cut from every direction. The real fracture in the ownership story shows up when you introduce opportunity cost. A homeowner's property appreciates on the full purchase price of $600,000, even though they only put down $120,000 of their own cash. At a conservative 3% annual return, that leverage looks powerful on paper. The renter, meanwhile, can only invest the $120,000 they saved, but they can place it in the stock market at a 7% average. So the homeowner gets leveraged exposure to a slower growing asset, and the renter gets unleveraged exposure to a faster growing one. Neither path is free, and both carry risk, but only one is sold to you as the responsible adult decision, and it happens to be the one where everyone else gets paid first. The bank, the government, the Strata Corporation, and 2 real estate agents. This is the architecture you're not supposed to see. Every dollar you send toward home ownership passes through a series of hands before any of it actually sticks to your net worth. The bank skims interest, the government skims taxes, the strata skims fees, and the realtors skim their commission right off the top. And you, the person who shows up every day and earns the income, you sign the checks and get whatever is left after everyone else eats. That is not a conspiracy. It is just the structure. And the structure doesn't care if you feel proud turning your front door key when you stretch them across real time, not just 1 year, but 5. That is the habit you need to break. And the tool is incredibly boring. You'll want to skip it, but do not skip it. Open a spreadsheet. Start with the renting column, because it takes about 30 seconds. Your monthly rent goes in. Your renter's insurance goes in. That is essentially it. For a place renting at $2,850 a month, your annual unrecoverable cost is $34,560. Write it down. Stare at it. It definitely stings, but at least it is honest. And it is the entire picture. Now move to the buying column and watch how fast the lines multiply. Your mortgage payment isn't one cost. It is 2 costs fused together. Part of it, the principal, comes back to you as equity. The rest, the interest, is gone. So write each unrecoverable line down: property tax, home insurance, maintenance, and the property transfer tax, plus the realtor commission you'll owe when you eventually sell. Each line is a dollar that leaves your life and never returns. And most people have never seen them stacked in a single column before. When you finish, add up each column. For a 1-year hold, the renting column totals $34,560. The buying column strips out the principal you get to keep, and factoring in opportunity costs, it lands around $49,460. That is a gap of nearly $15,000, exposed by nothing more than 2 columns on a screen. No algorithm, no financial advisor, charging you a percentage. Just you, a spreadsheet, and the willingness to be bored for 45 minutes. Do this exercise once, and something shifts in your chest. When someone says renting is throwing money away, you'll feel your jaw tighten, because you've seen your own numbers, and you know buying can throw away even more on a short timeline. Do it again when your lease renewal comes up or when interest rates move. The numbers will change, and sometimes buying will actually win, especially as you stretch the timeline out to 5 years or beyond, where total rent climbs toward $179,852, and the mortgage math finally starts to tilt in your favor. But you'll never know where that tipping point sits for your life unless you sit down and build the sheet yourself. This isn't a grand financial strategy. It is 45 minutes and a coffee. It is the most boring thing you'll do all week, but it separates people who make housing decisions from people who just guess. The spreadsheet doesn't care about your emotions or those granite countertops. It only cares about what is recoverable and what is not. Now imagine someone 3 years into a mortgage, staring at a job offer. The salary is better, the commute disappears, but they cannot move because selling now means eating $24,516 in realtor commissions on a home that barely appreciated enough to cover the initial transfer tax. Their down payment is pinned inside the walls of a property they must escape, and the math that looked so clean just collapsed at year 3. That is the part nobody puts on the thumbnail. The $72,236 advantage that buying holds over renting when you stretch the lens to 5 full years. That number has a silent condition printed underneath it in very small font. You actually have to survive the hold, and surviving the hold isn't a metaphor. It is a monthly, measurable act. It means your bank account can absorb a special levy from your strata, one that arrives in February with absolutely zero warning. It means when the furnace dies in December, you don't use a credit card, paying 19% interest and quietly undoing every dollar of principal you built. It means when your company restructures and your income drops for 6 months, you don't panic list the property and hand a realtor 5 figures just to get out from under the crushing weight. So before you look at those massive, unrecoverable costs for buying versus renting and think the answer is obvious, ask yourself a different question. Not which number is smaller. Ask whether you can actually reach the finish line, where that smaller number actually becomes real, because the renter's number is the same no matter what. It doesn't care if you switch jobs, move cities, or take a pay cut. It just keeps ticking at the exact same rate. The buyer's number looks so attractive at the 5-year mark, but it requires you to white-knuckle through every single month without flinching. That is the gap this entire video has been building toward. Not the gap between renting and buying on paper, the gap between the theoretical best outcome and your actual ability to stay solvent. Every single advantage of buying is a future reward that demands present tense survival. So here is what I want you to walk away with today. I'm going to be very specific because vague advice is worthless. Don't start this journey by asking whether buying is better than renting. Start by building what I call a holding buffer. Before you ever sign a purchase agreement or talk to a mortgage broker, sit down and calculate every non-mortgage cost of owning for 1 full year: property tax, home insurance, strata fees, and a maintenance reserve. Then add 20% on top for the things you didn't think of. For a $600,000 home, that overhead runs close to $42,000, which means roughly $700 a month on top of your mortgage. If you can't comfortably cover that $700 every single month while still contributing to an emergency fund, you are not ready. That is not a judgment. That is just cold arithmetic. Now, if you do have the buffer and can genuinely hold for 5 years, the math tilts in your favor. And it tilts hard. That $72,236 difference between renting and buying, once you account for principal recovery and real estate appreciation, that is not a fantasy. That is what the numbers produce when you give them enough runway. But the runway is the variable, not the interest rate or purchase price, not the neighborhood, just the runway. Your ability to keep paying, keep holding, and keep absorbing shocks for 60 consecutive months without being forced to sell. One last thing, I didn't promise you that buying will make you rich, and I didn't promise you that renting will make you rich either. What I showed you is a framework for comparing 2 paths, using real costs, real returns, and real trade-offs, so you can finally stop guessing and start calculating. The spreadsheet doesn't care about your feelings or what your parents did. It doesn't care what some influencer told you. It only cares about inputs, and you are the one who controls the inputs. So here is your one tiny action for tonight. Open a blank spreadsheet, just one tab. List every single monthly cost you'd face as a homeowner. Not just the mortgage, I mean absolutely everything. Property tax divided by 12, insurance divided by 12, strata or HOA fees, and your maintenance reserve. Then, Compare that total to what you're currently paying in rent. If you can cover that gap from your existing cash flow while saving, you might actually be closer to ready than you think. If the gap makes your stomach tighten, you just saved yourself from a very expensive mistake that is worth more than any down payment. What is the single biggest non-mortgage cost in your area? The one that most first-time buyers completely overlook. Drop it in the comments because I guarantee someone else is watching and they are about to make that exact same mistake. Your one comment might be the thing that stops them.